Let me tell you what they never told you about intelligence. The entire education system, every school, every university, every career counselor who ever sat across from you was built on one assumption, that the smartest thing you can do with your mind is pick one thing and go deep, specialize, niche down, become the person who knows everything about one specific domain and nothing threatening about anything else. And for most people, that advice produced one result: a ceiling. A hard, invisible, professionally constructed ceiling above which their thinking could not reach because their knowledge base did not extend far enough in any direction other than the one lane they had been trained to stay in. The people who broke through that ceiling, the ones whose names you know, whose ideas changed industries, whose thinking produced things that did not exist before they existed, almost none of them followed that advice. Almost all of them were polymaths, people who deliberately built knowledge across multiple domains and then did something with that combination that specialists could never do alone. Leonardo da Vinci, Elon Musk, Benjamin Franklin, Aristotle, Charlie Munger. Not specialists, polymaths. And here is what nobody tells you. Being a polymath is not a gift. It is not a personality type. It is not something you either have or do not have. It is a system. A deliberate, learnable, repeatable system for building and connecting knowledge across domains in a way that compounds into something genuinely rare. This masterclass is that system, step by step, nothing left out. Let us build what a polymath actually is and what it is not. Before we build the system, we need to destroy the myth. Most people hear the word polymath and picture Leonardo da Vinci painting the Mona Lisa in the morning, designing flying machines in the afternoon, and writing philosophy at night. They picture a level of intellectual range so extreme and so effortless that it could only belong to a once-in-a-generation genius who existed in a different era under different rules. That picture is both accurate and completely misleading at the same time. It is accurate because Da Vinci was genuinely one of history's most extraordinary polymaths. It is misleading because it suggests that polymath-level thinking is the exclusive territory of supernatural genius, which means most people dismiss the concept as irrelevant to their actual life before they ever examine whether it might be the most relevant concept they have ever encountered. Here is the real definition. A polymath is someone who has developed genuine competence across multiple distinct domains and who uses the intersection of those domains to think, create, and solve problems in ways that pure specialists cannot. Notice what that definition does not require. It does not require mastery of 10 fields simultaneously. It does not require genius-level ability in any single domain. It does not require you to be Da Vinci or Aristotle or any other historical figure whose circumstances bore no resemblance to yours. It requires competence, genuine, functional, applicable competence across multiple areas. And it requires the deliberate practice of connecting those areas, of letting knowledge from one domain illuminate problems in another, in a way that most people, because they have been trained to think in silos, simply never do. Charlie Munger, Warren Buffett's partner and one of the most successful investors in history, built his entire investment philosophy on what he called a latticework of mental models drawn from physics, psychology, biology, economics, mathematics, and history. He was not the world's greatest physicist or the world's greatest psychologist. He was someone who understood enough from each domain to pull the right model off the shelf when a real problem required it. That is the polymath advantage, not knowing everything. Knowing enough from enough places that you can think in ways that people trapped in single domains cannot access. And that advantage is completely buildable. Here is how. Step 1. The polymath mindset. Destroy the specialist identity. The first and most important step in becoming a polymath has nothing to do with what you study. It has everything to do with how you see yourself as a learner. Because here is the trap that kills polymath potential before it ever develops. Most adults have an identity attached to what they know and what they do not know. They say things like, I am not a math person. I am not creative. I am not good with technology. I am not someone who understands science. These are not descriptions of fixed reality. They are identity statements, stories about who this person is that have become so embedded they function as actual barriers to learning. A specialist identity is particularly dangerous because it feels virtuous. Being deeply committed to one domain feels like focus, like discipline, like professional seriousness. And in certain contexts, it is all of those things. But when that identity becomes, I am only a person who does this one thing, and everything outside it is not for me, it has crossed from productive focus into a cage that limits every dimension of your thinking. The polymath mindset begins with one fundamental shift. From I am someone who knows about X to I am someone who learns. Full stop, without domain restriction, without the comfort of predetermined limits. I am someone who learns, and the subject of that learning is determined by curiosity and strategic need, not by the identity I adopted when I was 22 years old and had experienced almost nothing. This shift sounds simple. It is not. It requires you to be willing to be a beginner again in domains where you have no existing competence. And being a beginner is uncomfortable for adults in a way that children do not experience, because adults have egos built around what they already know, and not knowing something feels like a threat to that structure. The polymath tolerates that discomfort, more than tolerates it, actively seeks it, because the edge of your current competence is the only place where real intellectual growth happens. And a life spent entirely within the boundaries of what you already know is a life of compounding intellectual stagnation, no matter how deep that one domain goes. Here is the practical exercise for this step. Write down every domain you currently avoid because you have told yourself it is not for you. Mathematics, art, history, biology, philosophy, business, writing, music theory, whatever your list is. Then pick one item from that list, specifically the one that makes you most uncomfortable, and commit to spending 30 minutes per week in that domain for the next 90 days. Not to master it, not to become an expert, to break the identity barrier, to prove to your own nervous system that the boundary was invented and is therefore removable. That is step one. Everything else is built on top of it. Step two, the knowledge architecture, how to learn across domains without losing depth. Here is the practical problem that stops most people when they try to build polymath range. They try to learn everything shallowly and end up knowing nothing deeply. They skim across 10 domains, pick up surface-level familiarity with each, and produce a collection of cocktail party facts that feels impressive until someone asks a question that requires actual understanding, at which point the shallowness is immediately exposed. This is not polymathy. This is intellectual tourism, and it produces none of the actual advantages that genuine cross-domain knowledge creates. The solution is what I call the T+ architecture. You may have heard of the T-shaped person, someone with broad surface knowledge across many domains and deep expertise in one. That is a good start, but it is not the full picture. The polymath builds what I call T+, multiple areas of genuine depth connected by a broad surface of functional literacy. Here is how to build it deliberately. Layer 1 is your anchor domain. This is the field where you already have or are building your deepest expertise, your primary professional competence. The area where you can think in genuine complexity, where you understand not just the facts, but the underlying principles, the historical debates, the unsolved problems, the cutting edge. Every polymath needs this anchor. It is the foundation from which everything else becomes connectable. Layer 2 is your secondary domains. These are 2 to 3 additional fields where you build genuine functional competence, not expert-level depth, but enough real understanding that you can think in those domains rather than just describing them. The key word is genuine. You are not reading Wikipedia summaries. You are reading the books that practitioners in those fields actually read. You are understanding the core principles well enough to apply them to problems outside the field. This layer takes 1 to 2 years per domain, built through consistent, deliberate study. Layer 3 is your functional literacy domains. These are the wider set of fields where you develop enough understanding to recognize when a domain has something relevant to offer your thinking, and to have an intelligent conversation with an expert in that field, not deep competence. Intelligent, functional literacy. This is built through reading foundational texts, following key thinkers, and maintaining genuine ongoing curiosity without demanding mastery. The architecture matters because it solves the depth versus breadth tension that paralyzes most people who try to build polymath range. You do not have to choose between depth and breadth. You build depth in a strategic few and breadth across the rest, and the combination produces the cross-domain pattern recognition that is the actual polymath superpower. Step 3. The learning system. How polymaths actually absorb knowledge. Most people learn passively. They read, they watch, they listen, and they retain a fraction of what they consumed and connect almost none of it to anything outside the domain they encountered it in. Polymaths learn actively and connectively. There is a specific system behind this, and it is completely teachable. The first component is principle extraction. Every time you study any domain, your primary goal is not to accumulate facts. It is to extract the underlying principles, the deep structural rules that govern how things work in this domain. Facts are domain-specific and largely useless outside their original context. Principles are transferable, and that transferability is where the polymath value lives. When you study physics, you are not primarily collecting physics facts. You are extracting principles like feedback loops, equilibrium states, and the relationship between pressure and temperature that will appear in disguised form in economics, in psychology, in organizational behavior, in negotiation. Everywhere you look, once you know what you are looking for. When you study evolutionary biology, you are not primarily collecting biology facts. You are extracting principles like selection pressure, adaptation, and the relationship between environment and organism that illuminate everything from market competition to personal habit formation to the development of cultural norms. Every domain has principles. Extract them. Write them down. Build a personal library of principles organized not by domain, but by the type of problem they address. This library becomes the most powerful thinking tool you will ever own. The second component is the connection journal. Every single day, without exception, you write down one connection between something you recently learned and something you already knew from a different domain. One connection. That is the entire practice. One observation that something you encountered in domain A illuminates something you already understood in domain B in a new way. This practice feels minor. It is not minor. It is the daily training of the specific cognitive muscle that makes polymathic thinking possible. The ability to see structural similarity across surface difference, to recognize that two things that look completely unlike each other are actually governed by the same underlying principle. That muscle is not natural. It is built. And the connection journal is the training protocol. The third component is the teach it back method. Before you move on from any significant concept in any domain you study, you write an explanation of it as if you were teaching it to a smart person who knows nothing about the field. No jargon. No borrowed complexity. Plain language that forces you to actually understand what you just encountered rather than carrying the comfortable illusion of understanding that passive reading produces. If you cannot teach it in plain language, you do not understand it yet. Go back. This is not optional. The teach it back method is the single most reliable test of genuine comprehension that exists, and it is the filter that separates real knowledge from the kind that evaporates the moment you close the book. Step 4. The domain selection strategy. What to learn and in what order. This is the step that most polymath guides skip entirely. They tell you to learn broadly without ever helping you decide what to learn or why. Domain selection is not random. The most effective polymaths, the ones who produce genuine innovation and not just intellectual range, are strategic about which domains they combine. And there is a framework for making those choices deliberately. The first principle of domain selection is strategic distance. The most valuable cross-domain connections are not between adjacent fields. They are between fields that are far apart on the surface but share deep structural similarities. Physics and economics. Biology and organizational design, military strategy and business competition, music theory and mathematics. Adjacent fields already share vocabulary and concepts. The cross-pollination between them is already happening because practitioners in those fields are already in conversation. The real insight potential lives in the combination that nobody has thought to make yet. And that combination almost always involves domains that look completely unrelated from the outside. When you are selecting your secondary domains to build genuine competence in, look for fields that are structurally distant from your anchor domain, but that address similar types of problems at their core. If your anchor domain is about predicting human behavior, look at fields like evolutionary biology, game theory, and physics of complex systems, not at adjacent social science fields that are already talking to each other. The second principle is historical depth first. In every domain you study, start with the foundational historical texts before you touch contemporary material. Not because old is better than new, but because historical foundational texts reveal the principles of a field in their purest form. Before the accumulated complexity of decades of specialist debate obscured the core structure under layers of technical vocabulary and narrow academic argument. Reading Adam Smith before reading contemporary economics. Reading Darwin before reading contemporary evolutionary biology, reading Sun Tzu before reading contemporary business strategy. The principles in those foundational texts are clearer, more transferable, and more connectable to other domains than the highly specialized contemporary material that builds on top of them. The third principle is problem-led selection. The most powerful driver of domain selection is a genuine unsolved problem in your life or work that your current knowledge base cannot adequately address. When you encounter a problem that your existing mental models cannot solve, that is your signal to go find the domain that has already solved it. This problem-led approach produces faster, deeper, more retained learning than curiosity alone, because it gives the new knowledge immediate context and application. You are not learning abstract principles. You are learning tools for a problem you are actively trying to solve. The retention and the connection rate are both dramatically higher. Step 5. The integration practice. Turning knowledge into thinking. This is where most people who try to become polymaths fail at the final step. They build the knowledge. They read across domains. They extract principles and maintain their connection journal and teach concepts back to themselves. And then they go back to their actual work, their actual problems, their actual life, and think in exactly the same way they always have because they never built the practice of actually using the cross-domain knowledge they accumulated. Knowledge that is not integrated into your thinking process is just an expensive collection. The polymath advantage is not in what you know, it is in how you think. And the gap between the two is bridged by one specific daily practice. The practice is called the multi-lens audit. Every significant problem or decision you face, you run it through a minimum of 3 domain lenses before you form a conclusion or take action. 3 completely different disciplinary frameworks applied to the same problem. Not to find the one right answer, to find the dimensions of the problem that a single lens would have left invisible. Here is what this looks like in practice. You are facing a decision about whether to leave your current job and start your own business. The single-lens thinker approaches this through their primary domain, financial analysis or risk assessment, or whatever their professional framework suggests. They get one answer shaped entirely by one framework's assumptions and blind spots. The polymath runs the multi-lens audit. They apply the evolutionary biology lens. What selection pressures is this environment producing, and am I adapted to them, or is adaptation available? They apply the game theory lens. What are the incentive structures of all players in this situation, and how do those incentives shape likely outcomes? They apply the historical lens. What does the history of people who made similar transitions under similar conditions reveal about the variables that actually determined success or failure? 3 lenses, 3 different sets of invisible dimensions suddenly visible. A decision made with 3 times the relevant information. Not because you spent 3 times as long on it, but because you brought 3 times the relevant disciplinary wisdom to bear on it. Build this practice until it is automatic, until the first response to any significant problem is not what do I think, but what do my various domain frameworks reveal when I apply them here. That shift in the first move of your thinking is the practical difference between specialist and Polymath cognition in action. Step 6. The Polymath schedule. How to build this in a real life. Here is the practical reality that nobody addresses. You have a job. You have relationships. You have existing obligations that consume the majority of your time and energy. The advice to simply learn more across more domains sounds actionable until you sit down at the end of a full day and realize there is genuinely no time left that has not already been claimed by something else. This is not an excuse. It is a real constraint that requires a real system. The Polymath schedule operates on 3 time blocks that together require less time than most people spend passively consuming content on their phone. Block 1 is the morning 30 minutes every morning before the day's obligations begin, dedicated entirely to deliberate study in one of your secondary or functional literacy domains. Not email, not news, not social media. One book, one course, one primary source in a domain you are intentionally building. 30 minutes daily across a year is 180 hours of deliberate cross-domain study. That is enough to build genuine functional competence in one new area annually. Block 2 is the weekly connection session. 90 minutes once per week, dedicated entirely to reviewing what you studied that week and writing connections. What principles did you extract? What did those principles connect to from other domains you already understand? What problems in your current life or work do those principles illuminate? This is the integration practice translated into scheduled time. Without this block, the knowledge accumulates without compounding. With it, the knowledge begins to build the latticework. Block 3 is the quarterly deep dive. 1 week every 3 months, dedicated to immersive study of one specific domain. Not superficial survey. Genuine immersion, multiple books, video lectures, primary sources, conversations with practitioners if accessible. The goal is to move functional literacy toward genuine competence in one targeted domain per quarter. 4 deep dives per year. Over 5 years, that is 20 domains of genuine engagement layered on top of your anchor domain. 20 domains of genuine engagement over 5 years, using only the time most people spend on their phone. The mathematics of deliberate polymath building are not as demanding as most people assume. They are demanding enough to require real commitment, but they are completely achievable within the constraints of a full adult life. Let me tell you what is waiting on the other side of this system. Not just more knowledge, something more valuable and more rare than knowledge. A different quality of mind. The polymath does not just know more things. The polymath thinks differently than the specialist in a way that compounds over time. Problems that stop specialists cold are often solved quickly by the polymath. Not because the polymath is smarter, but because the polymath has more relevant frameworks available and has trained the habit of reaching for them. Opportunities that are invisible to people working within a single domain are visible to the polymath, because the polymath can see the pattern that the specialist's tunnel vision prevents them from recognizing. And the accumulation of that advantage, the compounding of cross-domain thinking applied consistently over years, produces a distance between you and the people who stayed in their single lane that grows wider every year without you having to do anything dramatic to maintain it. The system does it. The daily 30 minutes does it. The weekly connection session does it. The quarterly deep dive does it. Da Vinci did not become Da Vinci in one dramatic burst of genius. He became Da Vinci through decades of deliberate, curious, systematic engagement with every domain of knowledge available to him in his time, combined with the habit of connecting everything he learned to everything else he knew. You have access to more domains of knowledge than Da Vinci ever did. You have more learning tools, more primary sources, more accumulated human understanding available at your fingertips than any polymath in history ever had access to. The only question is whether you are going to use it, or whether you are going to stay in the lane they built for you and wonder why the ceiling never moves. The system is in your hands now. Build the mind. Leave the lane. Start today. Stay sharp.